The date was June 26, 2016. MetLife Stadium, New Jersey. 82,000 people inside a bowl of noise that had been building for 90 minutes of suffocating, nervy football. Argentina versus Chile, Copa America Centenario final. And Lionel Messi, the man the entire footballing world had unanimously decided was the greatest to ever play the game, was standing over a penalty spot with everything he had never won sitting 12 yards in front of him. He took 4 steps, he struck the ball. It flew over the crossbar, high, wide, and completely disconnected from the technique that had produced over 500 goals at club level. The kind of miss that made commentators go quiet mid-sentence because there was genuinely nothing to say that the silence was not already communicating more powerfully. Argentina lost. Chile were champions again, and Messi walked to the nearest camera, sat down, and in a voice so completely flat it frightened people more than tears would have, said the words that stopped football for 24 hours. For me, the national team is over. It is a decision I have made, and it will not change. What nobody watching that press conference could see was what was happening inside his brain. Because the scientists who would later study Messi's neurological profile across 2 decades of elite performance would identify that evening not as a breakdown, but as the single most necessary event in the creation of the player breaking records at the 2026 World Cup right now. He had been here before, not once, not twice. 4 times in major finals with Argentina. 4 times the trophy went somewhere else. And the weight of those 4 failures was not sitting in his chest, the way football journalists described it. It was neurological. Every unresolved high-stakes failure leaves a permanent trace in the brain's prediction system. A pattern of threat signals that activate automatically the moment the brain recognizes a matching context. The penalty spot, the final, the white shirt. Argentina needing him. His brain had a file on exactly how this context ended. To understand why, you have to understand what was happening at Barcelona in the same period. At the club, Messi's brain operated in what neuroscientists call a high-certainty procedural environment. Xavi understood where he would move before he moved. Iniesta felt the timing of combinations without conscious communication. The entire structure was, in the most literal neurological sense, an external extension of his internal processing architecture. His brain never had to think. And that is the highest compliment neuroscience can pay to an elite performer. When the environment matches the brain's processing patterns so precisely that conscious deliberation becomes unnecessary, the deep procedural memory system takes complete control. The basal ganglia runs every decision below the level of awareness. What commentators called genius, scientists called uninterrupted procedural execution. Now watch Argentina footage from the same period. Watch the final stages of major matches. Watch the slight hesitation, barely visible but measurable in frame-by-frame analysis. Between receiving the ball and the first touch. Watch the decision-making slow by fractions of a second that are invisible in real time, but catastrophic in a penalty shootout. What you are watching is the prefrontal cortex switching on. The prefrontal cortex is the brain's executive center. In everyday life, it is valuable. In elite sport, under maximum pressure, it is the single most destructive force a performer can face. The moment it activates during a procedural skill, one trained to the point of deep automaticity, it begins monitoring the execution as it happens. The foot still swings, the technique still fires. But it fires through a layer of neurological noise it was never designed to operate through. And in the difference between a penalty that hits the top corner and one that clears the crossbar, that noise is everything. The cortisol data explains the biological mechanism underneath. Cortisol, the brain's primary stress hormone, in the concentrations generated by a Copa America final, following years of accumulated failure, creates tunnel vision, degrades fine motor control, and directly amplifies prefrontal cortex activation. The more cortisol in the system, the more aggressively the conscious brain attempts to take control of movements that are supposed to be automatic. For 11 years, every Argentina final triggered this exact cascade. Not because Messi lacked desire, because his brain had spent 11 years building a deeply encoded threat file associated with the specific combination of Argentina context, final stage football, and penalties. Each failed final added another data point, and the brain's prediction system consulted that file automatically before any consciously chosen response could intervene. No tactical change could reach inside that file and delete it. No new manager could overwrite it. The architecture that was failing had to fail completely before it could be replaced. Partial failure produces patches. Near misses produce reinforced avoidance. Only total, irreversible system breakdown forces the brain to abandon the existing structure and build something genuinely new. This is what the scientists mean when they say the 2016 collapse had to happen. Literally, neurologically. The brain cannot build the pressure performance architecture it needs to operate at its ceiling until the old, insufficient architecture has failed so completely that repair is no longer an option. The press conference was not an ending. It was the trigger. What happened inside Messi between 2016 and his return to Argentina later that year was not sentiment overriding resolution. It was the early stages of a documented neurological process that sports scientists call post-traumatic growth. Not recovery. Recovery means returning to the previous state. Post-traumatic growth means the brain builds something structurally different and neurologically superior. New pathways form. The emotional regulation system recalibrates around a new baseline that incorporates the experience of having survived the worst. And the prediction system that had been generating catastrophic threat responses begins the slow process of updating its model based on what survival of the collapse actually demonstrated was possible. The 2018 World Cup in Russia was not a triumph. Argentina scraped through the group stage and lost to France in the round of 16. But watch the pressure moment data from Russia compared to previous Copa America campaigns. The prefrontal cortex interference pattern was already measurably reduced. The reconstruction was in progress, stress-tested and refined with every high-pressure moment the rebuilt regulatory system successfully navigated. This is stress inoculation. Repeated exposure to the specific conditions that previously caused performance disruption builds a graduated neurological tolerance. Every high-pressure Argentina moment, Messi's rebuilt brain, successfully regulated, added a survival data point to the threat file that had previously contained only failure data. And with each survival data point, the catastrophic cortisol response gradually recalibrated downward. Copa America 2021, the Maracanã, Argentina versus Brazil in the final. For the first time, Messi moved through a major tournament with the quality of automaticity, the Barcelona brain quality that had been absent from Argentina finals for 15 years. He was not playing better because the pressure was lower. He was playing better because the rebuilt architecture allowed his procedural skills to run at the automatic level, even while the threat signals were firing. Argentina won. And what that victory produced was not peace. It was neurological consolidation. The brain strengthening every pathway associated with the behaviors that produced the outcome. The rebuilt architecture was marked as successful. It grew stronger. The 2022 World Cup final against France. 2 goals evaporating in the final minutes, extra time, penalties, was precisely the context that had broken the pre-2016 Messi repeatedly. He scored his penalties. Argentina won. He lifted the trophy. And here is where the story should have ended, according to every pattern in football history. It did not end. Because the 2022 World Cup did not resolve his ambition. It released it. Resolution closes a chapter. Release removes a weight. Winning in 2022 did not satisfy and signal decline. It removed the 15-year psychological burden that had been consuming enormous neurological resources throughout his entire career. And removing that weight did not diminish his performance capacity. It freed it. The 2026 Messi is playing with a brain that has never operated with this much available resource, directed purely toward performance. The threat file has been overwritten. The prefrontal cortex interference is gone. Not suppressed, structurally gone. The cortisol response has been recalibrated to sharpen rather than disrupt. The scanning speed, the touch-to-execution gap, the complete absence of hesitation in pressure moments. The data tells the same story from every angle. The record he broke at this tournament was not achieved by a man coasting on legacy. It was achieved by a brain that spent a decade being destroyed and rebuilt, and emerged with a neurological architecture superior in every measurable dimension to what existed before the destruction began. The penalty cleared the crossbar. The press conference voice went flat. The retirement words were spoken. The scientists were not watching an ending. They were watching the only starting point from which what followed was ever neurologically possible. The trauma did not interrupt the story. The trauma was the story. Everything else, the trophies, the records, the monster the world is watching at the 2026 World Cup right now, was simply what happened when a brain refused to stay broken.